Good evening to you. We are rightly concerned today about the double earthquakes that occurred affecting Syria and Turkey. We are all eyes and all ears because already we know under the Mount of Olives in Israel there's a fault line that if it's triggered by one of these earthquakes nearby, it could be a huge disaster because it's already a fault line. So earthquakes, as we know, are sometimes a shift between tectonic plates. Sometimes it's a weakness in the tectonic plate. And if there's an existing fault line already, as it is in the Los Angeles border, then it will be a huge disaster. So we are already thinking on these things when Turkey and Syria disaster happened. At the same time, we know we have been told that there will be smart cities in the world, 40 for an experiment, and they will be monitoring the activities of the citizens, and citizens will have everything at the fingertip through online, and they will be permitted. They will be well provided online. They will be, and school attendance needs only be minimal with online, and office attendance will be minimal with online, with human interaction minimized, and also they will be allowed 100 trips out of their city for a year at government expense. But if they attempt to go out on their own, they will be prosecuted. All this is for the purported purpose of reducing the carbon print. Now, the world's worst ecological disaster is found in the bed of the oceans. Oceans are our ecological reserve for controlling the pH value, acid-base balance to the corals, and also the massive vegetation on the ocean bed absorbing carbon dioxide and producing oxygen. Because the ocean bed in its undulations has mountains taller than Everest in the ocean bed. These are the ones that have been affected by the ocean dumping that goes on with so many liners dumping excess garments, and also all liners doing their crude oil refining in the sea itself. So that's just a citation for you to understand how much ecological disaster happens in the ocean bed, while global reset is attempting to minimize sovereign nations producing their necessary food, manufacture, citing carbon print increase, and trying to bring in global regulations towards that. And of course, we know the recent pandemic also promoted global health laws to restrict sovereignty of nations and get them under global control. So this is what is going on day by day. Now we are going to look at this phenomenon from a social intelligence point of view. Here is the diagnosis. The people walk in the futility of their minds. So a lot of human energy goes for gas, froth and frivolity for things that really don't help humanity even in their survival. Futility of their mind takes a lot of investment, a lot of wastage. Secondly, darken in their understanding. That also happens. Besides the futility, the good things we don't see, futile things we energize much. Then we are told, excluded from God's life. So the best God scope in us that our designer, our good shepherd has put into us is in abeyance because we try to do it ourselves without his architectural plan, without his design, without his energy. Excluded from the life of God. Why? Because of the ignorance and because of the hardness of their heart. One factor is ignorance, But the other fact is, even when we get to know the better way to deal with people, we go hard-headed, hard-hearted. Then what happens is, having become callous, then this hardness of heart makes calloused morals. Then humanity gives themselves to debauchery, sensuality, for the practice of every kind of impurity and greediness. This is what has happened to humankind, and this has come to a point where earth resources cannot contain the greed of man. Now, you may not like this analysis, but this is the fact of the matter. When we are a little sane and keep thinking, we are concerned for our children. Long before the pandemic came, long before this global elite's plans came, we consumed all we had for next 400 years in the last 40 years. There was no generation that got into the consumerist extravaganza, designed and facilitated, stimulated to bring such a time as this. Now, the global reset people cry foul that human population is the problem. So when these earthquakes come like this, we take reference from a passage in the last public sermon by the Good Shepherd, in which he said certain phenomena that are going to increase. He said there will be family breakups. He said it will be like how people behaved in the time of the old city Sodom, from which comes the word sodomy, and we know that is on the increase. Then he said a strange thing, that there will be earthquakes in many places. Now we know we have had always earthquakes, but the passage says it would be like the birth pangs increasing in ferocity and frequency. That is why the earthquake in Turkey and Syria trouble us. In one day, 2 earthquakes with 8.7 Richter scale severity, which has not happened for the past 100 years, 2 earthquakes of that severity happening in the same place. Of course, we are used to earthquakes and a little ripple. But this brought down so many areas, a very large area, and 1,650 have been identified as dead already, and many under the rubble. How soon deliverance and liberation operations can get to them is one has to wait and see. So I was citing this, how society has moved, and the Good Shepherd said these are the signs. One important thing was the earthquakes, which is showing that the earth is aging and the tectonic behavior is becoming unpredictable. We have to first know that the globe has an amazing design. Down underneath are the foundational tectonic plates, which is nickel and iron, huge, thick tectonic plates, and inside which you get the magma and the fiery high temperature. But then to cushion the rotationary velocity of the earth, there are deep oil oceans and deep water oceans, all inside the globe. So when the globe has to rotate at its furious rotational velocity, we don't shake, because there's an immense shock absorber system inside the globe that regulates, no shakes. So it's a humongous design. All I am saying this for you to understand that when earthquakes are erupting at regular frequency, one gets concerned that the design that is holding the earth in this rotational balance might be getting old. Fourthly, we are told in that list that there would be pestilences or plagues. And we saw how one engineered plague ran all over the world, and which now we know it was engineered, it was designed to do what it did. So we are left with a few more signs that children will rise up against, a generation will rise up against another generation. the older generation, and that's how Black Lives Matter and famous people and their statues have been brought down. Sri Lanka had its own Aragalaya, the struggle. So the trust that the younger generations had in the older generation is broken. Now, this is exploited by national politics for them to jockey themselves into power, but they are forgetting that all this helps the global elite to take control of sovereign nations. This we have to keep in mind. So nations lose their sovereignty, nations lose their clout for decision, and all their resources available in their country is being now hijacked by global resource users, and country gets the tuppence for the resources they have. Of course, bad politics in the nation have played into the hands of those who are into a global reset. So, in a time like this, how do we decide? The Good Shepherd has given us a promise that the world has been defined as those who are in a green pasture, watched over by the Good Shepherd, and those who are in a jungle, living in struggle for existence, survival of the fittest, might is right. And this slide down to this individualistic terrorism. We don't like terrorism, but we have so much of individualistic terrorism. Started with Sigmund Freud, who gave a basis of, who gave an explanation to justify deviations in sexuality and immoral behavior. In 1859, Charles Darwin wrote Origin of Species, which was only survival of species in fact, and Karl Marx wrote Das Kapital. At the same time, in the same year they were published. We of course know that Charles Darwin cribbed his idea from Wallace, who wrote about it initially, before Charles Darwin did. And the world, these three philosophies took over the world and made human behavior and human thinking completely godless, in the sense they did not need God anymore, because Darwin said we just descended by ourselves, and Karl Marx justified violence for social transformation, and Sigmund Freud said a man cannot help but live for his appetites. So there was apparent pseudo-scientific justification, which became science as time went on. This was in a backdrop of all the scientific pioneers who believed in a designed universe, believed in a benevolent designer who designed every scientific law for man's good. So they went searching for the scientific principles and laws and how to apply them for humanity's benefit. So all pioneer scientists like Lord Kelvin, Michael Faraday, Robert Boyle, Sir Alexander Fleming, the discoverer of penicillin and antibiotics, all of them were believing in a God who was benevolent, who was wise, and he designed everything for good purpose. But man has this curious tendency to go beyond the good to the evil. This is an ancient problem. So let it be the atom. If you split the atom, which man was capable, you can put atomic energy for good use, but largely atomic energy, since Japan's Holocaust in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, have been used to get ready with nuclear missiles and destroyers, massive nuclear liners, which are all nuclear powered. In simpler things also, when man discovered how to interfere with the reproductive system, medicine provided drugs for abortion. I entered medical faculty in 1972. Incidentally, I had the best result in advanced level, having sat from St. Thomas's College, Mount Lavinia, I also became batched up in every exam in the Colombo Medical Faculty. So when we entered 1972, I entered the medical faculty, we still had the Oath of Hippocrates, a famous surgeon at that time, read it to us, and one part of the Oath of Hippocrates gets us to say, I will not help a woman to procure an abortion. That was part of the Oath of Hippocrates. But in 1972, that very year, the International Medical Association removed that clause from the declaration. So present-day doctors don't even know that the Oath of Hippocrates prohibited abortion. Thank God Sri Lanka still has a prohibition on abortion, but abortions happen. But in the West, the human life has very little value, so that the first executive act that President Obama did was made abortion till the last week legal. That was his first executive action as the President of USA. So you can understand how flippant people have become about live birth, about the fetus, life in the womb. So I have put out some signs. When do you think world's end would come? I'm not looking at how bad the ecology is, bad as it is, and how economy has really tumbled world over, but I'm looking at sociological moral signs. One, when there are more family breaks up than marriage, more divorces than marriage. Two, when there are more abortions than live birth. So these are, and when the percentage of child abuse increases in the family and pedophilia gets legalized in different states, just the way abortion got legalized, and when euthanasia gets legalized, when man wants to be God over human life, these are some parameters that tell us that some kind of apocalypse is near. This word apocalypse comes from a Greek word which means the unveiling of last things. So when you say it was an apocalyptic event, it means that it was out of the book kind of thing. So in the good book, these four phenomena are described using the language of horses. Bear with me, I'll try to make it intelligible to you. This is found in the last book of the Bible, chapter 6. That book is called the Book of Revelation because it is unveiling or showing us things to come by getting us to understand things present. So it's not spooky. It's not about, absurd predictions, but it's about understanding present phenomena that is galloping to a climax man thinks he's making. So here it is, the first horse was white in color. So it looks like a peaceable fellow, but what he is doing is he who sat on it had a bow, but arrows are invisible, but arrows being shot into the mindsets of people, to conquer the mindsets of people. So a lot of philosophies that provide for global control was set forth, and to remove the individuality and checks and balances God had made for society. For instance, when everyone is in their biological family, in their country of birth, they are safe from control by outsiders. But you dissociate the biological family by promoting divorce and remarriage, just happenstance marriage, living together without marital commitment, and then you engineer circumstances that family members have to leave the country, engineer immigration, mass migration. This happened in the Middle East about 7 years ago. Now it's happening globally. People in Chicago are leaving in droves because there's a job shortage. They are coming to the Middle East. People in Sri Lanka are also living in terrible numbers because of our economic situation. So mass migration is not happenstance, it is engineered. Mindsets of people and philosophies that are being put to practical use are effecting this kind of change. Secondly, second horse is called a red horse, and what is he doing? It was granted to take peace away from the earth, that men would slay one another, and a great sword was given to him. So what follows philosophy, this kind of philosophy, is the action of the sword, powers or movements that draw blood. So we found communism world over began to prove the point that revolutions need more blood, and to keep the revolution going, you will shed more blood. That's how Marxism works. Then we had the First World War, then we had the Second World War, then we now have the possibility of nuclear annihilation. And Putin is ever so trigger happy, and we are watching anxiously what would happen to Ukraine. So that's about how the red horse is active, and many regimes have become genocidal in different countries. We have found this, that the red horse is active and inexplicable bloodshed has come around. The third horse is more difficult to understand. It needs a little wisdom. It's black in color, and look, I behold a black horse, and he who sat on it had a pair of scales in his hand. So this is trade and commerce. And what is trade and commerce? What is happening to trade and commerce? It is described. A quart of wheat will be the price of a denarius. This is old language, which means just enough grain for the day can be bought by the daily wage. This is high inflation. You understand? Denarius was the daily wage of that time, and man's daily wage, a person's daily wage, can get him only some grain shortage, grain high prices, but it is said, do not damage the oil and the wine. The rich, the super rich, will continue unaffected. So we find 95% of the world's GDP is controlled by 5% of people, and the wealth distribution has become unequal since 1970 at a rapid pace. Lastly, I stop with this. The fourth horse is called a pale horse, and that in the Greek is the color of dying grass, that greenish yellow death sign, the fourth horse. And what is he doing? Ashen horse. And he who sat on it had the name Death, and Hades was following with him. So a lot of demonic supranormal activity released through the digital screen, digital games, monsters. To my Colombo Empathic Learning said, I am Dr. Lalith Mendis, by the way. My last official post was as founding head of Department of Pharmacology in the Calgary Medical Faculty, and I originated research on the effect of the digital screen, pixel screen, on brain, neurochemistry and neuronal behavior, and I have presented my academic paper to Sri Lanka Medical Association in 2019. If you ask for me, I can send it to you. My WhatsApp number to contact for any of these science and reason clips, talks, is 074-211-5011, 074-211-5011. If you are from another country, plus 94-74-211-5011. I also have an app, Golden Nuggets. You can download it free of charge from Google or App Store. So this last horse, his activity is peculiar. The supranormal is increasing, and kids are drawn into that supranormal, paranormal behavior and activity because of the use of the digital screen, gaming, murderous, violent games, and their personality is taken over, And many have committed suicide, many have attempted suicide because of the change that they have gone through without parents realizing that their child is in peril. So I have done many talks on this subject. Please listen to my clips on this. When you find a child constantly irritated, depressed, not sleeping, wakes up in the morning with a bad, foul mood, and uses strong languages against a sibling, and refuses to go to school, all the time on the phone, they are sleep disturbed, appetite disturbed, know that those are danger signs. And prevention is better than cure. Though in our Empathic Learning Center we do try our best to reverse any level of digital toxicity, but if you bring them early, it's much easier. So this pale horse has a few more activities. It is said authority was given to him on the earth to activate the sword, bring famine, bring pestilence, and activity of monsters or wild beasts. So we know earthquakes and pestilence we have seen in unusual frequency. So these are some phenomena that are described. Now you may not believe all this, nor did I. Before I entered medical faculty, I was an atheist when I sat for my A-level, and soon after my father was also a rationalist, so being the eldest son, I followed what he was like. But just before entering medical faculty, I had a real convictional reorientation, and having had arguments with a friend, I began to think, began to understand. When my brain increased, my heart shrank. Like Boyle's law, when pressure increases, volume gets reduced. I realized when my brain was increasing, my heart was shrinking. I had an academic card. Even now I want to do research, but I found I'm only interested in knowledge. I'm not interested in people. Academics, especially those who are bent on research, become like that. For us, the patient is only another data point. Does this patient, is he proving my point, theory, thesis, or not? So that's how knowledge becomes your God and your addiction. People talk about ice addiction, heroin addiction, very bad, but I was a knowledge addict. So I did not need people. I could just sit with books for hours and hours. I had the habit of going to sleep with a book on my chest because I have this unusual brain. I can, once I read a book once, I understand it and I remember it. But I'm very thankful that the Good Shepherd came to my life, and I have to say he saved me from my own brain. I still have a good brain, but now I know people are important, and good brains must serve people. We have a gift, every one of us, to be a benefactor, because we are created according to the design of a benevolent God. And He is our Good Shepherd. We can receive Him into our life, and our thinking and mindsets will change. So I have discussed with you in the second part of my talk 4 mega trends going on in the world, theories that are taking over the mindsets of people, engineered and disseminated by global designers, global research designers. Very soon they will introduce health laws that make certain things mandatory, and sovereign nations will have to do it. Second horse was the red horse, where political maneuvers will take the lives of people. Third horse was a black horse, where economy is, with a trade balance, economy is getting concentrated in the hands of a few people. Final horse, which was called the pale horse, is releasing some unusual activities, paranormal, kids getting addicted to monster stuff, high-flying stuff, unrealistic stuff. Their virtual reality has changed. Their reality has changed into all these fantasy stories. They hate the normal day-to-day book reading, and they want to be fantastic and believing in the supranormal. So I have called it a new bipolar kind of thing. They don't do their daily work. They don't like it. They hate it. I have had kids coming and telling me that. But they are addicted to the fantastic, and YouTube influencers are their guides. So parents, it's a difficult time for you, but I have written many books on this subject. Gen Z's Right Learning, and the foreword is by former Dean of Colombo Medical Faculty, Professor Rohan Jayasekaran, and by the warden of my school, St. Thomas's College, Mount Lubinia. These books are available from Sarasabhi bookshops and from Vijitayapa bookshops, and also from Apeksha bookshop in Boralla and in Moratuwa. Please do take some of them. They are designed for parents to read with kids. So my slogan is, read with them, don't fight with them. Bring them to understanding by reading with them. Thank you for listening. As I said some time ago, my WhatsApp number to be contacted for any clips you want, please cite them, name them, is 0742 11 5011. I'm Dr. Lalith Mendis. Thank you for joining.